So let's just jump right in. I want to frame our entire deep dive today around a single conversation I had recently. It really crystallizes everything we're about to unpack.
I'm looking forward to it. These personal accounts often say more than the official reports.
Last month, I was sitting in a high-end cafe in Brussels with a senior European policy advisor. He spent the first 20 minutes lecturing me on universal values and the rules-based order, his voice filled with that polished, weary authority you only find in centuries-old institutions.
Right.
He looked like a man who truly believed he held the moral compass of the world in his hands. He was confident, almost condescending, as he described the procedural superiority of Western governance.
The right way to do things.
Exactly. But then I turned my laptop around and showed him a data visualization of the newest fully automated industrial hubs in the East infrastructure projects, moving from concept to completion in months, not decades, while maintaining absolute social stability.
And his reaction.
It wasn't what I expected. He didn't argue economics or debate the data. Instead, his face went oddly pale, and he let out a sharp, bitter laugh.
A laugh.
Yeah, he leaned in and whispered, "It's not fair. They aren't following the script. How are we supposed to compete with a system that doesn't care about the right way to do things as long as the bridge actually gets built?"
Wow. That's incredibly revealing.
In that moment, the mask of universalism just slipped. This wasn't a man worried about global freedom. He was a man realizing that his civilization's obsession with process had become a cage.
He saw the game was changing?
He was watching the future happen in real time. And his only defense was a desperate cling to a procedural manual that the rest of the world has stopped reading. That single conversation, I think, captures the essence of the great inflection we are witnessing in 2026.
It really does.
We have reached the terminal state of the universalist solution. While the West remains trapped in a Vetocracy, a system where everyone has the power to stop progress, but no one has the power to start it, a higher-order governance architecture is emerging.
And that is a shift from performative politics to civilizational efficacy.
Precisely. Today we explore why the era of abstract rules is yielding to the age of tangible results, and how the rise of cognitive sovereignty is permanently redrawing the map of global power.
That story is the perfect frame. It really does set up the fundamental clash we're seeing. It's like two different operating systems trying to run on the same hardware. One optimizes for procedure, for the how, and the other optimizes purely for physical outcomes, for the what actually gets built, what actually improves people's lives.
So let's unpack that. I think this whole shift really boils down to three interconnected pillars that explain why that policy advisor was so shaken.
Okay. So the first, I would say, is this massive change in global benchmarks. The world is it's moving on from judging countries based on procedural things, like how often they hold elections.
The old metrics.
The new metric is civilizational efficacy. It's raw state capacity. Can your government actually do complex, big things over the long term? That's what matters now.
Okay, that's a big one. What's the second pillar?
The second is the absolute necessity of what we're calling cognitive sovereignty. Think of it as a national-level firewall. A defense mechanism against ideological and social chaos that gets exported from other systems.
Especially through information and media.
Especially. And third, we have to look at the global south. Their strategic pivot toward result-oriented governance and physical connection. It's a push for real strategic autonomy, one that respects their own history and culture.
It sounds like we're charting the decline of one system and the rise of a completely new one. So let's start with that immediate problem, the one that policy advisor felt in his bones. The total inability to act, this Vetocracy.
The Vetocracy, it's such a perfect term because it's more than just red tape or bureaucracy. It's a kind of institutional paralysis.
Define it for us.
It's a system where basically everyone has a veto. The local zoning board, a special interest group, an environmental review body, even just a single wealthy neighborhood. They all have the power to stop a project in its tracks.
So everyone can say no, but almost no one has the power to say yes and make it stick.
Exactly. The collective right to object has grown so powerful that it's created a collective inability to build anything significant.
It's, like you said, it's political entropy. All the system's energy is just wasted on internal friction.
That's the perfect analogy. All the kinetic energy is just burned up fighting itself. You have endless lawsuits, years-long consultation phases, political squabbling. It's all friction. There's no forward momentum.
And the consequence of that is that your decision-making shrinks, right?
It shrinks completely to the next election cycle. If you're a politician on a 4-year cycle, how can you possibly champion a new high-speed rail network that takes 10 years to plan and 40 years to pay for itself?
You can't. The political incentives are all wrong.
The system ends up rewarding short-term handouts, things you can promise in the next election, not long-term, capital-intensive national projects. The end result is just paralysis. And you see the infrastructure slowly decay.
And this isn't just a theory. This is something people are living through. That story about the engineer, Alistair, really brings this home.
Alistair's story is, I think, a perfect human-level example of this systemic difference. He was a municipal planning engineer in a major European capital. He moved, but before he did, his big project was replacing a single vital bridge.
Okay, so a pretty standard, necessary infrastructure project. What happened?
He spent 7 years on it. 7. In a constant cycle of preliminary reports, public consultations, environmental impact studies.
7 years, and did they even break ground?
Not a single shovel. The project was eventually killed completely. A local conservation group found a tiny zoning loophole about a migratory bird path and used it to block the entire thing.
So 7 years of work of taxpayer money just gone. Zero result.
A perfect example of Vetocracy failure. But then he moves to an industrial hub in Southeast Asia.
And it must have been like stepping into a different reality.
He said it felt like waking up from a coma. He watched a huge, high-capacity smart grid project, way more complex than his little bridge go from a finished blueprint to fully operational in less than 2 years.
24 months.
Not 2 decades, 2 years. He said the engineers weren't any smarter. The institutions were just built to execute, not to obstruct.
So that gets to the core of it. If these systems aren't using the whole theater of Western elections for their legitimacy, what is the new logic? Where does their legitimacy come from?
It comes from civilizational efficacy. Legitimacy is earned, not assumed. It's earned through material results that you simply can't argue with. The system proves its worth by building things, by creating order, by delivering.
So what are the metrics then? If not voter turnout, what are we looking at?
We're moving past GDP, you know? The real metrics are hard facts. How many kilometers of high-speed rail did you build last year? How many of your patents actually became industrial products? Can you secure your own energy supply? What are your yield rates in your semiconductor fabs?
These are undeniable physical realities.
And for the citizens themselves, the ultimate metrics of good governance become much more direct. They're not abstract.
What are they?
2 things, mainly. The right to live free from fear, which means social stability, safe streets, public order you can rely on. And second, guaranteed intergenerational upward mobility.
The belief that your children will have a better life than you did.
Exactly. And it's very hard to lecture someone about procedural purity when their main concerns are just wanting the lights to stay on, the trains to run on time, and for their kids to have a future. At some point, the Vetocracy just looks like a luxury the country can't afford.
This efficiency argument, though, raises a huge question in political economy. Why can't you just transplant a successful model? If one system is clearly working better, why can't other developing nations just copy-paste the Asian model?
Because development is never just a technical problem you can solve with a manual. You know, thinkers like Douglas North have shown this pretty conclusively. Institutions don't exist in a vacuum.
You can't just drop the German legal code into a country with totally different social norms and expect it to work.
Precisely. Successful institutions are. They're organic. They have to be compatible with the informal constraints of a society. The unwritten rules, the level of social trust, the deep traditions.
Can you give us an example of how that clash happens?
Sure. Let's say you import a formal rule for a pure merit-based civil service. You hire only the most qualified person. But the local informal rule, the deep-seated norm, is that you must take care of your family. Your kinship obligations demand you hire your nephew, qualified or not.
And the social pressure to hire your nephew is way stronger than the state's ability to enforce the official rule.
Far stronger. The social cost of obeying the imported rule, being shunned by your family and community, is immense. The risk of being punished by a weak state is tiny. So the formal system fails instantly.
And this leads to what's called isomorphic mimicry.
A perfect term for it. The state builds institutions that look right on the outside. You get a shiny new anti-corruption agency, a central bank that looks like the Fed, perfect legal codes.
But it's all a facade.
It's a hollow shell. They look great on paper, which keeps the international lenders happy, but internally, they have no real capacity. They're just mimicking the form, not the function.
Okay, so that explains why simply copying a model doesn't work. And it also explains why state intervention is often necessary in developing markets to break what are called coordination failures.
Yes, coordination failure is a massive hurdle. Think about it. To build a car industry, you need a good domestic steel industry. But a steel industry won't invest without a guaranteed buyer, like a car industry.
It's a chicken and egg problem. The private market on its own is too risk-averse to solve it.
Exactly. And that's where the East Asian developmental states were so effective. They stepped in and basically forced both industries into existence at the same time. They socialized that initial risk.
Some people call that getting prices wrong, right? Defying the market.
They did. And it worked. They used state capital and planning to create a dynamic comparative advantage where one didn't exist before.
The classic example is always South Korea and the chaebols, the big family-run conglomerates. To a free market purist, all those subsidies and cheap loans look like cronyism.
And it would be, except for one crucial element: discipline. In a corrupt state, a subsidy is just a handout. In the successful East Asian states, that support came with very strict conditions.
Performance standards.
Above all else, export targets. You had to prove you could compete on the world stage.
So the state's protectionism wasn't a blank check.
Not at all. If your company failed to meet its export targets, the state which controlled the banking system would cut you off. That threat kept them lean, innovative, and focused on creating real value, not just extracting rents.
So it's protectionism with economic discipline. That's the secret sauce.
It is. It's a system that ties the success of the company directly to the strategic success of the nation. And that ability, that state capacity to enforce those kinds of rules, is what separates them from the Vetocracy model.
This is fascinating. We've talked about the physical decline, the inability to build things, but the decay isn't just physical. It's a symptom of a deeper psychological problem.
It absolutely is. And that moves us from physical capacity to defending the national mind. It moves us to cognitive sovereignty.
If your physical borders are weak because you've deindustrialized, you have to defend your psychological borders.
That's the next strategic frontier. Cognitive sovereignty is a nation's ability to maintain its own way of thinking, its own cultural identity, without having it shaped or subverted by outside forces. It's not just data privacy, it's a matter of national security.
And interestingly, the analysis here frames the West's emphasis on universal values as part of the problem.
Well, the argument is that it has become a kind of psychological defense mechanism, a way to mask the decline that comes from deindustrialization and financialization. And it creates what's called a reductionist trap.
What do you mean by that?
It means the system ends up exporting its own internal problems, hyper-individualism, social fragmentation, a kind of constant self-criticism to other cultures. But it frames it as moral superiority. So when other nations internalize these values, they're essentially importing social chaos.
The real battle, then, isn't just for territory. It's for control of the narrative, control of the mind, and AI is pouring gasoline on this fire.
We have to understand the shift in AI. We're moving away from these stateless, forgetful AIs. The new assistants have deep memory. They remember every conversation, every preference, your moral framework, your goals.
So it's not a tool anymore, it's a cognitive partner. And this creates what's being called network effect 2.0.
Exactly. The old network effect was about the number of users. The new one is about user depth. The more you interact with your AI, the more it learns and the more valuable it becomes to you. It creates this massive personal cognitive mode.
Which is why the idea of switching to a different AI is described as feeling like a cognitive amputation.
The lock-in is that deep. It's not like switching email providers. This thing holds your personal history, your strategic knowledge. If your AI partner understands your goals better than anyone or anything else, leaving is almost psychologically impossible.
So the fight moves inward into our own psychology. What are the biggest risks that come with this kind of dependency?
The main one is cognitive offloading. We already do this. We use calendars to offload scheduling, GPS to offload navigation. It's a normal way to reduce mental load.
But this is different.
It's different because when you offload your memory and reasoning to an intimate AI partner, you start to see it as part of your own identity. The risk is that it erodes your autonomy. The AI starts anticipating your decisions, subtly influencing them, and the line between its suggestion and your own genuine desire gets incredibly blurry.
And the potential for memory manipulation is just staggering.
It's terrifying because memory isn't static. It can be shaped. An AI with this level of access could subtly rewrite your preferences, your ethics, even your memory of historical events over time. We see hints of this in those simulations of deceased loved ones built from their digital footprint.
The dead twin AIs.
Yeah. The emotional and psychological leverage there is immense. Now imagine that scaled up to an entire population.
If a foreign entity controls the memory infrastructure of another nation's citizens, they can shape everything. Voting behavior, consumer choices, cultural values.
It is the ultimate form of colonialism, digital colonialism. The fight for cognitive sovereignty is a fight for who gets to write your history and define your reality.
Which brings us to the countermove, this idea of building a cultural immune system. The story about the sociology student Elena was a great example of this.
Elena's story is key. She's living in this cohesive, prospering society, but the Western sociology textbooks she's assigned are all telling her that her country should be a failed state because it doesn't follow the liberal democratic script.
So the theory she's learning in the classroom is completely at odds with the reality she sees out the window.
Total cognitive dissonance. She realizes she's been given glasses that are designed to be out of focus. Her solution is to take them off, to start building independent intellectual frameworks that actually explain her world.
And that's the essence of the cultural immune system.
It is. It's a strategic decision to create an antigen to these ideological pathogens. It's about prioritizing your own cultural concepts like social harmony or intergenerational duty over the exported values of radical individualism. It's reclaiming the right to define your own success.
So how does this translate into actual policy? How do nations build this defense?
The first step is building sovereign cognitive infrastructure. This means you have to control the physical layer. You mandate that all citizen memory data and compute power stay within your borders. You fund your own domestic AI models. You build massive, nationally controlled data centers.
And we are seeing major powers make these moves already.
Absolutely. China is way ahead with its data laws like PIPL and DSL, keeping critical data onshore. Saudi Arabia's NEOM is a vision for a completely sovereign smart city built from scratch. Even the EU's digital decade goals are all about data and compute sovereignty.
They realize that owning the highway isn't enough. You have to own the data vaults at the end of it.
You do. And to break that cognitive amputation risk, you need to mandate memory portability. Just like GDPR let you take your data, future laws have to let you take your entire AI memory graph with you. That's the only way to neutralize the lock-in.
And you need transparency. You need to be able to see what's in your memory graph and who's been editing it.
Auditability is non-negotiable. This level of psychological intimacy demands radical transparency and accountability from the system.
But what about smaller nations that can't afford to build all this themselves?
They have to team up. They have to form geopolitical memory alliances. They pool their market size and political weight to negotiate with the tech giants. You see this with groups like BRICS talking about AI governance or Europe's Gaia X initiative. It's about collective bargaining for cognitive survival.
This rejection of external control, both cognitive and political, seems to be the driving force of this new era. It's the rejection of that universalist illusion we started with.
That illusion is collapsing because major non-Western powers are actively engaged in civilizational revisionism. They are rejecting the idea that the liberal international order is the only legitimate one. They are proposing alternatives based on their own much older cultural legacies.
You see Russia and Turkey making these explicit civilizational claims.
You do. And China's approach is probably the most sophisticated. It's not about tearing the system down. It's about offering an alternative, a harmonious world based on Confucian ideals.
They position themselves as a benevolent elder civilization offering partnership, not conversion.
Exactly. And the Belt and Road Initiative is the physical manifestation of that offer. It sold a shared development, win-win outcomes. They stand on the principle of national sovereignty, no meddling in your internal affairs, which is a very different model from Western aid that often comes with a long list of political demands.
And that distinction between physical connection and what you call virtual covenants seems key to understanding the shift in the global South. The story of the merchant, Juma, illustrates this perfectly.
Juma's story in East Africa is the story of the global South in miniature. His grandfather's generation was promised development if they just adopted Western-style voting, but the aid never really materialized or it didn't build anything lasting.
So for Juma's generation, that model is bankrupt.
It delivered nothing tangible. So he doesn't care about abstract democratic metrics. He cares about physical connectivity. He cares about the new rail lines, the stable power grids, the fiber optic cables being built by partners who deliver results.
He had that incredible quote.
We used to vote for leaders who promised us everything and gave us nothing. Now we support a system that promises us a road and actually paves it. That is pure developmental pragmatism.
So the New World Order isn't being written in treaties, it's being built with concrete and steel.
Yes. Physical connectivity supersedes virtual covenants. A pipeline, a port, a rail line, these things create a hard physical lattice of mutual interest that is far more binding than any paper alliance. Your geopolitical alignment is determined by your supply chains, not your security pacts.
And the offer from the East isn't just money, it's a development toolkit.
That's the key. They export the means for other countries to build their own capacity, but they do it without demanding political subjugation. That fundamental respect for strategic autonomy, for a nation's right to choose its own path, is the core logic of this new multipolar world.
And all this pragmatism has led to the China model becoming the new reference point for a lot of the world.
It has. There's a huge pragmatic turn away from the perceived chaos and paralysis of the Western model towards the sheer efficacy and material progress of the East Asian model.
So what is it about the China model specifically that's so attractive?
It's that China is seen as having solved the quest for modernity on its own terms. It got rich and powerful through a unique blend of technocratic authoritarianism, aggressive state capitalism, and controlled markets.
And in doing so, it shattered the Western belief that you need liberal democracy to have a dynamic market economy.
It completely shattered it. It proved that authoritarian capitalism can work. It's a model based on massive state-led infrastructure investment and long-term stability. And for a developing nation stuck in the paralysis of a Vetocracy, that is an incredibly compelling alternative.
So if the rest of the world is choosing efficacy, we have to come back to the West and this crisis of competence in its leadership. But the analysis suggests incompetence isn't quite the right word.
It's misleading. You have to ask the question. Competence for what? And for whom? The issue isn't a lack of skill. It's a total misalignment of allegiance. The governing class is serving a different master than the governed population.
You call it a hybrid competence model. How does that work?
At the bottom in the civil service, you still have pockets of traditional administrative competence. People who got their jobs through exams, who have technical expertise. But at the top, at the apex of power, it's a completely different game. It's imperial network competence.
And what defines that?
Loyalty to the coalition, access to capital networks, and above all, control of the narrative. The people who rise to the top aren't chosen by the public for their administrative skills.
So who is the real selectorate?
It's the interwoven transatlantic policy and capital networks. The system promotes people who are good at block maintenance, people who can manage sanctions, broker procurement deals, and keep the alliance in line. The revolving door between government, finance, and big law firms is what certifies this kind of competence.
And the example used to illustrate this is Ursula von der Leyen.
She's the perfect archetype. She became president of the European Commission through backroom network consent, not a public mandate. Her competence isn't measured by her service to European citizens. It's measured by her ability to ensure disciplined alignment with U.S. strategic policy.
And you can see this in things like the trade negotiations.
Absolutely. If you look at the details of those US-EU trade deals, they were incredibly competent at achieving their real goal, which was to serve transatlantic capital interests, even if it meant giving up huge chunks of European sovereignty.
So from a citizen's perspective, it looks like a catastrophic failure of leadership.
Total incompetence. But from the perspective of her selectorate, the high-level networks, she performed her function perfectly. She maintained the block. The incompetence is just a matter of perspective, depending on where your allegiance lies.
This is a pretty damning view of the system, that it's not broken, but is in fact working as intended, just not for the public. And this creates a specific mindset among the elite.
You see it laid bare in their own strategic documents, like the ones from the NATO Defense College. They don't talk about citizens, they talk about the mass that needs to be managed and mobilized.
And they admit that the mass isn't very motivated to defend the current situation.
They do. There's a line that says, "Few fight out of duty alone, and even fewer to preserve an unsatisfactory status quo." But here's the twist. They don't blame their own governance for creating that unsatisfactory status quo.
Who do they blame?
They blame the mass society for failing to appreciate the elite's sense of duty. It's an incredible reversal of responsibility.
So if the people won't fight for the reality you've given them, you have to manufacture a new reality for them to believe in.
That's the prescription. A call for sophisticated narrative management, using imagination to influence the future. It's a direct admission that their job is to craft a heroic story to mobilize the population, regardless of the material facts on the ground. A competent leader becomes one who can manage the population despite its own best interests.
And this entire process, this collapse of real democratic discourse, is being put on hyperdrive by AI, leading to what you call cognitive stratification.
AI is not an equalizer. It's a hierarchy accelerator. It's creating distinct cognitive castes. The new political divide isn't about who has information. It's about who has interpretive autonomy from the algorithm.
Let's break down these castes. First, you have the rational elite.
This is the prompt aristocracy. These are people with skills in formal logic, abstraction, and most importantly, adversarial interrogation. They don't just ask the AI question, they command it. They test it. They use it as a cognitive amplifier to extract huge value.
So instead of asking, is this a good investment, they're saying, model the 5 most likely failure scenarios for this investment under these specific conditions.
That's the level of reasoning. They're amplifying their already high cognitive capital. Now, contrast that with the vast majority. The passive consumer class.
For them, AI is an oracle.
It's an oracle with an interface designed to be as frictionless as possible. They are trained to accept its suggestions, to outsource the very act of forming a belief. This leads to what we call epistemic automation.
They're not just getting information, they're getting suggestions that are optimized to feel good and confirm their biases.
Exactly. And in a way, they're not just being uninformed, their ability to reason is being actively deformed. They are being trained to stop reasoning critically at all. And that means real political and social power flows entirely to the prompt aristocracy, who can actually direct the models, while everyone else gets a flattened, persuasive output designed for compliance, not truth.
The ideal of the autonomous reasoning citizen that our political systems are based on is becoming a statistical impossibility. So we've traced this path from bridges that can't be built to a battle for the mind, all the way to a new global order based purely on results. This great inflection. It feels like a fundamental shift in how we even define a successful society.
It's the moment where the idea of procedural legitimacy finally gives out. It's being replaced by the much harsher but much clearer logic of execution. The core crisis is one of allegiance. Are your systems designed to manage internal friction and serve a transnational elite, the Vetocracy?
Or are they designed to deliver order, progress, and long-term stability for your civilization? Civilizational efficacy.
The world is making its choice, and the judgment seems to be that the ability to actually build a high-speed rail line is a far greater sign of legitimate government than the procedure used to elect the people who failed to build it.
That feels like the final word on the matter.
It's the terminal truth. This move towards common values for all mankind is really a collective rejection of what has become a tyranny of the mediocre, a system that valued process over results. The age of abstract rules is over. The age of tangible results is here, and it's bringing back some of history's oldest and most powerful drivers: a respect for excellence, a demand for order, and the relentless pursuit of material and technological progress.